AEW delivers bloods and guts and mattresses and fans complaining. Will Ospreay and Shingo Takagi have one of the best matches in recent memory, and Resident Evil Village gets a lot of great critical response. This is the Rantin Review Podcast. What is going on, you sexy bitches? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Podcast on this Thursday. A lovely day here in beautiful Baltimore, Maryland. We still haven't gotten the cicadas yet. Weather's been kind of messed up because of what's going on down south, so we got a lot of rain. A little chilly this time of year, especially for this time of year. I needed a jacket the other day, which is pretty crazy for May, but things are pretty good, all things considered. I want to let you guys know, of course, we do have the Patreon page, patreon.com/wrestlinrantin with 3 S's, RASSLINRANTIN, entertainment, gaming, movies, and pro wrestling. We will be doing another one of our old retrospective videos, and I have finally decided that we are going to be redoing an updated version of the New Japan Explained videos. They will debut on the Patreon page. I know a lot of people have been asking about it. If it's only going to be on Patreon, it'll be up first on Patreon, and then I will eventually move it over, an edited version, over to YouTube so everybody can watch it. But if you want to get it ahead of time and the retro reviews and the Q&A and all that other stuff, you can sign up for the Patreon page. There are tiers as low as $1. You can get $3 for the higher tier, and then the highest tier is $5. That's the old school watch along. So definitely check that out. I want to thank Austin Metzger for joining this week. I just see him just popped up on here just right as I looked at it. So thank you very much, all you guys who have been checking everything out. And it's gonna be a lot of fun on the Patreon page pretty soon. There's a lot of new stuff coming up I'm kind of excited about. Anyway, moving on this week to start off with the world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment. Lots of rumors going around that Daniel Bryan may be completely done with WWE. Apparently his contract is up, but that doesn't necessarily mean, for all of those people who are out there going, you all Elite Wrestling. No. I said the other week, I think Daniel Bryan will be taking a producer spot in WWE, getting that good WWE guaranteed money, and helping out some of the younger talent. The guy definitely has had a storied career, definitely a future Hall of Famer and multiple Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Daniel Bryan. If his career is wrapping up, hopefully they're going to give him a better send-off than they did Kurt Angle. But that's a story for another time. Speaking of going out, it looks like Chris Jericho is going to be taking some time off, maybe, from AEW, given the ending of the Blood and Guts match. I reviewed it up on the YouTube channel, so you can check out the YouTube channel for the full review of AEW's Blood and Guts on Cinco de Mayo. A lot of drinking, a lot of blood, a lot of guts, a lot of singing of Jericho, and a lot of commercials during the match. And the ending spot, which a lot of, the industry, I shouldn't say the industry, the community seems to be split. Like, if you're an AEW hater, you're going to, anything that they do that's slightly wrong, it's going to be like the worst thing in the world. And anything, if you're an AEW fangirl, fanboy, sweaty, anything that they do doesn't quite work out right. It's like, well, Look, here's a great key to life. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more because I'm talking about Twitter in a second. But a great key to life is to just be honest. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with what you like. Yes, you may really like something, but if it screws up, say it screws up. You may really hate something, but if it does something good, say it does something good. But I think we're at a point now, and again, I'm going to get into this a little bit later, where especially on social media, which I think a lot of people are dropping off of now. I know a lot of my friends have just stopped going on there. Some of them just deleted their accounts. It seems like it's a place more and more that's going to be for people who are just looking for things to be pissed off about and looking for things to criticize to make themselves feel better, as opposed to doing actual critiques, actual analysis of things, which I value a lot more and I pay much more attention to than people who are just saying, like, obviously blatantly biased things. And, that's not, I have no interest in that. It's childish and silly. And I'll get into that again later. I particularly enjoy the Blood and Guts match. Again, the ending, they could have done that a lot better. Same thing with the exploding ring thing. I think AEW, if I do have a negative criticism about the last couple months, is that they have veered, and I said this a couple months ago, they have veered a little bit too far into sports entertainment territory. They're trying to do stunts and stuff. I think a lot of people wanted it to be a little bit more grounded, a little bit more sports oriented. Although I do love the fact that they brought back a lot of these old school wrestling things at the same time. I would go for subtle over bombast. I would say for them. Differentiate yourself from WWE. You know, I know it's not a competition technically, but you know, a lot of this exploding ring stuff and the spot off the top of the cell with Jericho, it does feel like they're trying to, match or outmatch stuff that WWE typically does. I mean, that's a WWE. I mean, off the top of the cage, you know, WWE will always own that because of the Hell in a Cell matches with Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, and of course Mankind and The Undertaker. Doing some of these like exploding ring things, even though it's from Japan, that's synonymous with backyard wrestling. It's not quite with it. And I understand that they're trying to bring in all types of wrestling, which I appreciate. But again, if you can't pull it off, if you can't make the whole thing explode the way we saw it explode in Japan, if you can't do an off the top of a cage spot the way we saw Mick Foley do it, and we saw a lot of other people do it in the past, then don't do them. You can find more subtle ways that would distinguish yourself, more brutal ways, in order to do these finishes than what we saw there. I think they tried to address the possibility of fans being disappointed by a lackluster finish by having the match not just end out of nowhere, by having MJF and Jericho on top of the cage so it was visible in the focus of everything, what was happening there. But you got to remember, I remember the first War Games match, if you were at the Omni in Atlanta, the match just kind of ended. And if you weren't paying attention specifically to what was going on with James J. Dillon and the Road Warriors at that moment in the match, you had no idea why the match ended. But back in the 80s, that was fine. It was just like, it's just action. And then, okay, they won. My guys won? Cool, yes. Oh, they won? Boo. You know, that was it. Wrestling audiences today are a lot more cinematic in their expectations of wrestling, so you got to kind of keep that in mind when you're updating an old school thing, which is why I think NXT included pinfalls in the War Games match, which I'm 50-50 split on, because when I was a little kid and I made up my own little wrestling organization at 10 years old with my little wrestling figures and I had my War Games matches, I said they should end in pinfalls. But that was 10-year-old me. The older me appreciates this gang fight that, you know, you have to beat up everybody. It's a war of attrition. And that's what they did with the Blood and Guts match. It was basically the only guys left standing were Jericho and MJF, and it made sense that those guys have been in that match for like 30 minutes, bleeding, beating the crap out of each other, and slowly, one by one, they all kind of just exhausted out, except for Hager. And it wound up with the two leaders, and that's when the big mattress bump happened. Jericho fell. I mean, even still, you know, people are poo-pooing it and acting like, oh, that was nothing. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's not Mick Foley, you know, in 1998 Hell in a Cell. But, you know, try going up on your roof and taking your bed outside and put your mattress down and put a little piece of cardboard over top of it and go on your roof of your house and jump off of that and fall on your bed and see how well you feel in the morning. You know, it's not nothing. And I'm happy, and I've said this, and I've seen a lot of other people say this. To expect a 50-year-old Jericho to do a table bump like that, especially when we were all mad at a 40-some-year-old Matt Hardy taking a far worse bump and crashing, and then everybody complaining about that. It's like, it really is true about the wrestling audience, and you can't be happy. You know, no, it doesn't seem like it's ever as a collective happy. It's always going to be one half's going to be bitching about something, and the other half's going to be praising it, and it's all going to be based off of tribalism and not on actually whether or not the thing was good or bad. Was it great? The greatest thing ever? No. Was it as bad as the exploding ring fiasco? No. Was it as bad as whatever the hell happened with Randy Orton and the Fiend at WrestleMania? No, it wasn't. It was the match itself was a great gang fight, which is what War Games is supposed to be. The ending was a War Games ending. I appreciate it for what it wanted to do. The storytelling was great with MJF pushing, which a lot of people missed, because they were so wrapped up on tweeting about, oh, this is bad. missed the whole storyline ending with MJF going down and telling Chris, "Thank you." That was great. That was great storytelling, but a lot of people missed it because, again, I'll talk about that later. Moving on to something a little bit more positive in the wrestling world, Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay. I also cover this on YouTube, but it bears repeating. One of the best matches I've seen in a long time. I mean, look, those guys had my match of the year a couple years ago for the Best of the Super Juniors final. I picked that one. I wasn't, everybody else didn't pick that one. I was one of, about 25-30% of people who picked that one as match of the year that year. But these guys are developing a rivalry that is up there with Tanahashi and Okada, Okada and Omega, Naito and Okada, and just so on and so forth. And it's moving New Japan in a new direction as far as who's going to be in that top, upper mid card. It's very hard to say now because, again, we still have the idea of the Big Four, but the Big Four looks like he's going to have to expand because if Ospreay keeps putting on performances like this and they give him a long run with the championship, how do you not put him in the Big Four? And at that point, who do you take out of the Big Four? I don't care how they book him. I'm not going to take Naito out of the Big Four. You're not going to take Okada out of the Big Four. Tanahashi already fell out of it as far as I'm concerned. I know other people don't think that. Jay White's in the Big Four, and Kota Ibushi's in the Big Four. So maybe it's going to be more than a Big Four pretty soon in New Japan. Again, I'm afraid. I fear for the run though that they might take the title off of Ospreay at either the Tokyo Dome show with Okada or at Dominion. It's going to be very hard for Ospreay to come out of Dominion still IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. However, if they book Will Ospreay to have 1, 2, 3, I guess at that point it would have been 4 major title defenses, and he retained against Okada, Shingo, and whoever he might face at the second stadium show, if he survives that, whoever he might face at Dominion. And say that's Naito and Kota Ibushi or somebody. If he goes through that and retains that championship, Will Ospreay will go into the G1 as legitimate kingpin, and he will be a made man. I'm kind of hoping that they do that because, look, I mean, we spice it up a little bit. New Japan kind of it's a weird state for them too because over the last several years, typically by this point, the Gaijin ace, whether it was Prince Devitt or AJ Styles or Kenny Omega, has left after you gave them that spot in Bullet Club. And Jay White looked like he was, they even played it off of Jay White pretending he was going to leave at the beginning of the year. It's like, oh, well, we're going to need a new guy in that top Gaijin spot. Oh, wait, Jay White didn't leave, but now there's a new Gaijin going for the top Gaijin spot. You could argue that Will Ospreay, I would say right now, Will Ospreay is the top Gaijin in New Japan. So now, where do we do with that now? So that's the whole dynamics have changed simply from the fact that Jay White did not leave and go to WWE or started his own wrestling promotion like the last 3 guys did. So they're changing a lot in New Japan this year. Some of it I'm not happy about. Some of it I think is pretty good and pretty brilliant. Also beset with a lot of injuries and stuff. And now, unfortunately, this COVID thing that has hit them. And again, we still don't know. I can look it up right now. We still don't know whether or not it was Roppongi 3K, was it Okada, was it Minoru Suzuki, was it El Desperado, was it Kanemaru? We don't know. All we still have is just that 2 wrestlers tested positive for COVID. They are keeping their names private for the privacy of obviously the wrestler's medical condition and their family. And this is one of the classy things I like about New Japan is that they did that. They didn't plaster whoever it was and put their face all over the internet. They just said, look, 2 of our wrestlers have COVID. Obviously they were in this group of guys wrestled together, so they're all suspect and they all need to go on a quarantine, and the 2 that have it need to be treated for COVID, and the other 4, they're going to have to be quarantined for 2 weeks, and we're going to have to keep an eye on them. Now, the really weird thing about that is the only way I see that being a major problem is if one of them is Kazuchika Okada. Because you still have a month until the Tokyo Dome show. But if Okada is the one with COVID, which I don't think it would be, because I don't think Ospreay would have mentioned him if they were going to change that. I think they would have just immediately just started changing it to Ibushi or Naito or somebody. But if it is Okada, that kind of puts a big damper on that Tokyo Dome show. And yeah, so I hope it isn't. Now, there is some news about this, though, that the Fight app is going to be broadcasting those two stadium shows, the Wrestling Grand Slam shows, live on Fight for, I think, at about $19. So if you don't want New Japan World, you can get those shows for $19. I don't know how well that's going to do, because New Japan has not had the same buzz over here in the States as it has had before. I even noticed from my YouTube channel, a lot of the viewership is down for the New Japan videos. That also could be a consequence of the fact that I'm changing the channel up to not just be a wrestling channel. So I'm sure a lot of people are like, he's not just talking about wrestling anymore. Unsubscribe. So, who knows? But I think it's fair to say that New Japan is not as hot as it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. But they're still putting out quality stuff. It's not as good as it was a couple years ago, but I'm cutting them slack, man. They're working with one hand tied behind their back and have been for years. So the fact that they've even produced the stuff that they have produced and it's been as good as it has been is a minor miracle. So we'll see what happens in the future of New Japan. I will be taking a little bit of a break from them, and once the Road to shows start, I will peek in there, probably do an update every single week on a podcast or on YouTube about what's going on the Road to shows. So that's what's going on with New Japan right now. Now, I'm going to stick on wrestling for a bit before I talk about something else, but this is the thing that I'm laughing about wrestling right now. So here, Twitter is a terrible place. So I try very hard to stay out of flame wars. But last week, when AEW's ratings went down, Bryan Alvarez had posted out the number 889,000 or whatever. And, people were posting up, the AEW sucks. It's the end of AEW. Their ratings go down. This is the same. Now, the funny thing about this, it's the same thing that somebody posted a year ago. Well, if the ratings keep going down, they're not going to have any audience. So somebody else says almost the same thing. So I'm just like, look, AEW's audience for a particular reason, their numbers tend to decrease a little bit more than NXT's have when there's a big news story. When there were big COVID stories, the ratings, they got hit harder than NXT did. When it was the George Floyd stuff, they got hit harder than NXT did. The presidential speeches, they get harder hit than NXT did. So, of course, this triggered a couple people. One person in particular, well, two people in particular. Oh, boy, they sent me messages. They kept tweeting. And usually I go, yeah, whatever. But when you kind of barrage me with stuff at that point in time, and especially if you're dead fucking wrong, and you keep coming at me with dead fucking wrong stuff, my competitive side comes out. I'm like, okay, if you're going to insult me and you're going to be flat out wrong about what you're insulting me with, I'm just going to just bombard you with facts until you admit that you're wrong. And if you keep coming at me, I'm just going to keep throwing these facts at you. So eventually, it's a waste of time. I wasted probably like half an hour doing this nonsense, which I shouldn't be doing. But, every once in a while we get caught up in this crap. So, the argument went from, well, because then this week, I held the tweet until this week, because this week, of course, the ratings went up for AEW back over 1 million. I think it was 1.08 million or whatever. So I just responded to the tweet. I'm like, because the person's like, oh, you're still on that thing, like politics, like the AEW audience is more into politics, you're still on that? I'm like, yeah, I'm still on it. Look at the ratings. They were number 1 on cable television Wednesday. But the ratings are always going down. It's collapsing. It's terrible. So it was like 2 of them throughout every argument from, well, the TNT execs, 1.2 million fine, but that's not going to cut it. I'm like, no, well, WWE is struggling to get 2 million viewers, and they've got a 35-year head start on AEW. Not to mention, here's a and by the way, here's a post, and here's a quote from the general manager of TNT, TBS, and True TV, talking about the satisfaction they have with AEW. Well, it was only because they had a main event level match on. The ratings will be down next week. I'm like, probably because that's what happens with TV shows. When you had the Red Wedding, like a Game of Thrones, the ratings for the next show probably weren't going to be as high as the Red Wedding show. When Carl died on The Walking Dead, the ratings aren't going to be as high as the season premiere and the mid-season finale and when a big major event happens. Even going back to the old school days, and I'm really going to throw something at some people right now, when Luke and Laura got married and set the record for the most highest watched wedding in the history of television. Don't ask why I know that. My mother loved General Hospital. But next week, the next show, probably the next day, the next show they had wasn't as high. The ratings went down because that's what happens in TV. So outside of that, and just, I mean, and eventually, the one guy finally did concede and was like, all right, fine. It just, in a begrudgingly way, and then I still had to go, yeah, but, well, if you're happy about 1.2 million, then I'm like, I'm not happy or upset about it. I'm just saying, if you're gonna say stuff, at least be accurate. And if I'm presenting something to you that I know is a fact, and then you're gonna send me 20 tweets with no facts, just pulling shit out of your ass and just calling me names for a week straight without me responding to you, then I will wait a week. And when the ratings go back up, I will just throw all this shit at you. And I will be done. Now, look. I'm going to say, do not do this. Do not do what I just did. Do as I say, not as I do. I should not have done that. I should have let these ignorant people go on and be blissfully ignorant. Although I will say there always is a bit of satisfaction when you get in one of these things and the person finally admits that they were wrong because you just showed them like 15,000 ways in which they were wrong. But don't do that. I shouldn't have done it. Don't get involved with it. It is a bad thing to do. I am going to try very hard not to do it anymore. And if people and I think they stopped tweeting me now, thankfully, because I think they had nothing else to argue with. Because I shot everything down. But if you encounter that, don't do what I did. Just block them. That's just, be like Jerry Lawler. Just block, and John Bradshaw Layfield. Just block half of Twitter. Just block them. I think that's what the best thing to do. I'm serious, guys. I think at some point, it's not just in wrestling, it's in other avenues too. And God damn, it's really in politics. But I think, and I'm feeling this too, if my side hustles of YouTube and being an author on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and Google and everywhere else my books were sold, if I didn't need social media to advertise, and if I didn't need social media to let you guys know when I had new videos out, I probably at this point in my life would not touch freaking Twitter or Facebook. I've thought about canceling my accounts multiple times. I'm like, well, if I do, then the people who follow me there, they won't know when I have new stuff on, so I can't advertise to get new readers for my books. So I need to be on social media, unfortunately. But I'm sure I can do better of it. But that was just an interesting story I wanted to tell you guys. But if you do, again, I say don't get into those flame wars. But if you do get into those flame wars, have your facts ready. Go find your facts, and then just throw the facts at them. and because eventually they will run out of crap. They will just go, well, you're a mark. Which, by the way, again, those of you who listen to me for the longest time, once you call somebody a mark, you have lost the argument as a wrestling fan because, and I've said this repeatedly, the only people in the world who know what you're talking about when you go and call another wrestling fan a mark is a wrestling mark themselves, because nobody else in the world knows what the hell you're talking about. A mark to other people is a gambling term. It's a shyster term. It has no correlation to wrestling nerd to anybody else outside of the wrestling community. So, bit of advice: if you call people marks, probably shouldn't do so, because you're kind of proving that you're a mark yourself. I'm just saying. It's kind of like, I mean, it'd be like somebody, it's like some genetic physicist had some super genetic, I don't even know, because I don't know I'm not a genetic physicist, but if they had like some secret term that only genetic physicists know, and they were having an argument and threw that term at each other, any of us looking at them would be like, what? And then one would be laughing at the other one. Oh, you're a binary cell antimatter causal. Yeah. And we'd be like, what? What are you? You sound like both of you sound like dorks. So shut up. So You gotta love the internet, man. Here's something good on the internet, though. Resident Evil Village has come out. I played the demo. I cannot play that. But see, I'm conflicted because I really want to play that game. But I might save it for you guys on the YouTube channel because, as you know, I am going to be doing the next week. The Legendary Edition of Mass Effect comes out, so I will be doing a playthrough through all three Mass Effect, the entire trilogy, including all the DLC, which is included in it now, except for Pinnacle Station, which nobody cares about. But I will be doing that. But I think between the games, I may do, like after I do Mass Effect 1, I might pick up Resident Evil Village. I enjoyed playing it. It freaked me out because Resident Evil, they're not scary, but they're tense. The only one that ever really kind of scared me was the Resident Evil 4. And it was only because I had a nightmare one night that the El Gigante, which is funny because it's the same name as Giant Gonzalez's name in WCW was El Gigante. But the El Gigantes in Resident Evil 4, I had a nightmare that one of them was chasing me. And it was vivid as hell and realistic as hell. So that's the only, I was like, ugh. So I fear Resident Evil games for that matter. Now, I played Resident Evil 7, and I didn't have any nightmares or anything from it. Again, that was like 20 years ago, too. But I didn't have any problems with Resident Evil 7 that I played through. But Village, I see all the critic responses. It has got high marks from a lot of people. I think, oh God, let's see some here. IGN. Oh God, don't play audio because I really don't feel like hearing it. IGN says, As soon as I arrived in Resident Evil Village's sinister rural setting, its Resident Evil 4 influence reared its snarling head. See, now I'm automatically happy because Resident Evil 4 is my favorite Resident Evil game and one of my favorite games of all time. So a lot of them are saying that it's a mix of Resident Evil 4, a mix of Resident Evil 7, and a mix of Resident Evil 2, which I'm not a big fan of Resident Evil 2. I'm in a minority on that one, but the game looks amazing, and it seems creepy as hell. Seems like it's well paced. I can't wait to play more of it. Yeah, man, I'm excited for this, and I'm excited just to be able to do, as far as the channel's concerned, to do gaming content. I love story-based games. As you can tell, kind of the theme running throughout everything with me is storytelling. I don't care if it's a video game or pro wrestling or a comic book or a novel or movies or I don't care if it's stand-up comedy, whatever it is. If there's a good story in something, no matter what format it's in, I'm going to be down for it, which is why I always say, like, you know, I think to me, it's kind of weird that people will don't like wrestling, but like this, but like superhero movies. Because I'm like, well, wrestling and superhero movies are almost pretty much, it's the same basic concept. You have muscular men and women in outrageous costumes, fighting a lot, broken up into little groups and factions, and then every once in a while they have these big crossover events, and then and then there's a couple different companies that are competing against each other. It's like the same freaking thing. Except the thing that comic book, DC, and Marvel have figured out is how to make casual fans into hardcore fans. The thing that pro wrestling seems to really, really struggle with is making casual wrestling fans into hardcore wrestling fans. And there's a whole... In fact, I'm going to go into it right now. I was going to do this on another podcast, but this one's going to be a 30-minute one, so I got a couple minutes to do it. My theory on that is that the Attitude Era, we saw the big swell in wrestling, right? Kind of like the big boom that Marvel had, right? About 10 years after that. And it's interesting if you look at the two industries and how they rose. In the 90s, wrestling had its boom, and then it tapered off. 2008, I'd say the mid-2000s, starting with really the Dark Knight series, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight series. And then, of course, Iron Man, and then the MCU kicked off. The comic book movies had their boom, and you would think, but it's been over 10 years now. Hasn't stopped, still going strong, still the number one thing, making the most money in Hollywood right now. And why is that? Why is it that all those fans dropped off of wrestling? And some people dropped off of comic book, but not anywhere near, I mean, comic books are still a big force. Now, wrestling, to its credit, is still a major. I mean, again, AEW Dynamite was #1 Wednesday night. They still have they're still a money drawer for TV stations, but there's nowhere near what the explosion that the Marvel Cinematic Universe and even the DCEU, as screwed up as they've made it, have had. So why? I think it's that very reason I mentioned before. The wrestling audience in the 90s, in the Attitude Era, the Monday Night War era, they got people to watch for hotshot and stuff, for the Vince Russo's car crash TV stuff, naked women, cursing, violence, craziness, goofy spots, and basically, and people with catchphrases and stuff, about 1,000 things that had nothing to do with an actual wrestling match and the storytelling that happens in the wrestling match. Marvel, DC, and a lot of the superhero genre, and I guess you could extend this to like sci-fi in general in the movie space right now. What they wind up doing, particularly the comic book movies, they didn't do that. They used to do that. They used to throw, okay, we get this big name actor in there and we just, don't care really about the story. What Marvel did, and which is why the Marvel Cinematic Universe works, is they got people hooked on the comic book stories. And not only the comic book stories, but how the comic book stories are told as these serialized, continuing, never-ending stories where all of these different stories are intertwined. They lead to a big event, and then they go off away, and then you get new stories and new characters, and then they get to a big event, and then that cycle, they got people into that. They got people who had never read the Infinity Gauntlet or Infinity War or any of the Infinity Saga comic books. They got millions of people to know what the Infinity Stones were 6 years before we even saw Thanos actually, as Josh Brolin actually as Thanos on the screen. People knew who Thanos was before they went into Infinity War. They knew who he was. They knew what the story was. They knew about the Infinity Stones. They knew about all that stuff. I should know because I lucked out on this one. I was one of the first people, and I think it was 2016, to do a Where Are the Infinity Stones video on YouTube. It's still to this day on my old channel, my old movie channel, the most views I ever got. It was like 3 million views total at the end of the day for that video, which was amazing, and I loved it, and I definitely appreciate all the money I got from it. But yeah, man, I mean, but that's the thing, is that people wanted to know more. They were coming to channels and videos like mine to find out more about it because Marvel had said, here's this interesting storyline. Here's this mystery. And it's going to continue and continue and continue with these characters that you like. And it's based off of this other stuff. Oh, what's that other stuff? Let me go find out. Oh, let me go look on. Oh, here's a whole video. There's a bunch of videos about it. Oh, it's on Wikipedia, The wrestling industry did not get the casual fans to be fans of the core product, the core style of wrestling storytelling. They got them the fans of all the other stuff. And when all the other stuff got old, and then came down to just wrestling matches, then a lot of those people left because you never made them a fan of wrestling matches. I've said this before about the NFL. Like the NFL, if the NFL had not made people hardcore fans of every little intricate detail about an American football game and what to do on 3rd and 4 and quarterback ratings and whether or not you're a rushing team or a passing team, whether or not your defense is strong and what is this and people weren't into all of that stuff for the NFL. And the same goes for mixed martial arts too. They wouldn't have the fan base. If people were just watching the NFL to see fireworks and Ray Lewis coming out through the tunnel and whether or not Tom Brady was cheating on his girlfriend with Peyton Manning's wife and shit like that, and Aaron Rodgers drives a semi truck onto the field and prevents Anquan Bolton from getting a touchdown by ramming him with a truck. I mean, if that's what people were tuning in the football to see, football would not be what it is today. But they got people hooked on the story, the game itself. And I've said a million times, that's what pro wrestling needs to do. Pro wrestling needs to figure out how to make the casual fan, and get a lot of casual fans, care about their characters and take an interest in their backstories and then follow them because, hey, this is coming and this is coming and this is coming. And that's what the wrestling industry needs to do, in my personal opinion. But again, I'm not in the wrestling industry, so they don't have to listen to me. They can do whatever they want to do. I'm just saying, if you look at other industries that are similar to it, you guys didn't do the right thing during the Attitude Era. That's my opinion, is that they should have gotten fans hooked on the wrestling storylines and wrestling matches, as opposed to getting them hooked on bra and panties and catchphrases and monster trucks. That's all I'm saying. But I could be wrong. So, and I perfectly accept that, but I want to know what you guys think. If you catch me on social media, definitely let me know about that. One last thing, too. Next week, I am going to be sending out the survey. You guys who are interested in gaming will be picking out whether or not I have a femshep or male shep and a couple other things I need to know before I play Mass Effect and we start that playthrough. So, stay tuned to Facebook and Twitter, and if you're on the mailing list, it'll be on the mailing list as well. You will be getting that survey. It's like 3 questions. It's not that hard, but you'll be getting that pretty soon. So thank you guys for checking out the podcast this week, and I hope to see you soon. Stay safe out there and behave yourselves, but not too much.